President Trump lands in Beijing for his first trip to China in almost 10 years. He's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping for a two-day summit, and he's brought along with him a delegation of executives representing $12 trillion in American economic might. Welcome to the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Bremberg, along with my co-hosts Taylor Riggs, Jerry Willis, Jackie DeAngelis, and with us for the hour, he's bad to the bone, but we call him Mr. Sunshine, Rosecliff founder and managing partner Mike Murphy. Good to see you, sir.
Happy to be here.
All right. So what will it be? A massive trade reset, geopolitical deal-making, or another stalemate? Aisha Hasni is in Beijing with the latest. Hey there, Aisha.
Hey there, we'll find out soon enough because the president is going to get straight to work starting tomorrow, Beijing time. The president previewed for us what he's going to be talking with Xi about. And the first thing he says he's going to make a request is for Xi to open up China to some of these business leaders that are coming along with him, part of this big delegation of tech and business CEOs. He wants China to do business with them. He wants trade to be the topic of conversation coming out of this summit. But he also says he will have a long talk with Xi about Iran. He says he does not need China's intervention to get a deal with Iran, but he does note that it is China that stands to benefit the most from an open Strait of Hormuz because it gets a ton of oil from Iran. It is the biggest purchaser of the Iranian crude oil. Listen to this.
I have a great relationship with President Xi, and I think it's going to remain that way. We have a lot of things to discuss. I wouldn't say Iran is one of them, to be honest with you, because we have Iran very much under control. We're either going to make a deal or they're going to be decimated. So one way or the other, we win. We're going to be talking with President Xi about a lot of different things. I would say more than anything else will be trade.
Yeah, a lot of different things. It feels like everything under the sun is on the table. Everything from tariffs to artificial intelligence, chip production, the status of Taiwan, beef and soybean exports. Again, there's a large delegation of tech and business CEOs arriving here as well. According to Elon Musk, though, it was just him and the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, who were riding along with the president aboard Air Force One. The president truth socialing aboard Air Force One a couple of hours ago. He said, I will be asking President Xi, a leader of extraordinary distinction, to open up China so that these brilliant people can work their magic and help bring the People's Republic to an even higher level. Now, we won't see the president anymore tonight, Beijing time. He's at his hotel for the night. We will see him early tomorrow when he heads to the Great Hall, and that is where he is going to be received by the president of China, Xi. Back to you.
All right, Aisha, we will watch all of it. Thank you very much. Okay, Murph, what do you want to see? Big trip, Wong on the plane, Musk on the plane, Trump. The other guys, I guess, had to find their own ride.
Commercial.
That's right, commercial. Coach.
So what I love about this just from the jump here is that President Trump is handling his own messaging. So he's setting the stage for who he's with, who he's bringing, why he's bringing them, and what he plans to speak to President Xi about. He's not going to let the media or anyone else set the stage for what's going to happen. He's telling us. So what do we come away from this with? Clearly, both men have to come out on top. The two most powerful men in the world. Neither one's going to give in necessarily. But I think President Trump's plan to have an open China is a win, yes, for China, but a bigger win for the United States and the rest of the world. If you had a more of a democracy, more capitalism in China, how does that help our economy? So I think there's a lot of upside here. And if he just plays it the way he set it out, I think it's going to be a win.
Okay, open China. I have some skepticism, Taylor, about China's willingness to open. Nice goal.
Yeah.
I don't know that they want to do that, but I do think they would love to have NVIDIA chips, and not the second-rate ones, the first-rate ones. Do you think that's a big chip on the table in these negotiations?
Yeah, chips are part of the chip negotiating table. I do like that. Comment I heard this morning, maybe we give them not the latest and greatest chips, but just like 6 months behind or a year behind. And we talked to Daniel Newman yesterday, and I like that he was saying that we originally thought that chips depreciated in 6 months, and we're actually still using chips from 6 years ago. So if you give them chips from 6 months or a year ago, that may not be a bad thing. NVIDIA gets to benefit from it in the meantime, but they don't get the latest and greatest. And guess what? Yes, they'll reverse engineer, but we're always going to be a step ahead because we have, and I'll check your math on this, by my estimates, 14.7 trillion in market cap going over there, given the hefty weight of our CEOs. With that brain power, I guess I'm not worried about us only having the latest and greatest and China only having maybe a version or two behind, because we will always outmove her, we will always outsmart, because we have the brain power. When China mints a billionaire, that billionaire disappears. Do we remember that story? And everyone's like, where did he go? Because Xi Jinping doesn't like billionaires. We embrace, for the most part, we embrace ours, unless I'm in California or a blue state. But we embrace them. And so I'm just so confident that we will always outmove her. I'm going to be looking at what I'm going to call the Beijing basket. That's going to be the traded market cap of chips, perhaps, of goods that are over there given by those CEOs. If any deals are being cut with those companies, let's watch that as the Beijing basket and the new goods that will be sold.
Jackie, a lot of pomp and circumstance. Clearly, we saw when we broke in there the cheering for the president. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, we've seen these visits before, and Trump likes to make them big, and Xi Jinping knows that he likes to make them big, so he made it big. And you could see the president walking off Air Force One with a smile on his face, entourage in tow, a couple of big CEOs with him, many more on the way, his power flex, as we called it yesterday. So it was kind of the perfect welcome. But what was interesting to me is those kids that were all standing there, and they were chanting, "Welcome to the president." They had flags. They had a communist China flag, and they had an American flag. And they were waving them. And I'm thinking to myself, those two symbols are so inherently antagonistic. Communism and capitalism are ideological opposites. So I appreciate what the president is trying to do. And I think that he will get something out of this visit. He never gets, a total turnover, but small wins are important here in the trade game with China. And I think he will accomplish that in this visit. But when you think about this, it's wild to me because, think about the Middle East and the Iranians using nuclear weapons and terrorism as their control tactic. They're not giving that up without a huge fight. Well, apply that concept to communist China. President Xi's control comes in this form of communism, and he is not going to give that up, open up any free market or whatever. He's going to try to get what he can from the United States, maybe give something, which is why I think he's been holding back on the agriculture side. That might be what he gives, because actually he owed that to us from almost 6 years ago now. And they do small trade-offs like that. But, ulterior motives in that welcome, read between the signs, people.
Jerry, you like to put things in historical context, which I always appreciate. I will just add, I was maybe a little surprised to hear how much President Trump downplayed Iran as an issue that he wants to hash out with Xi Jinping. What do you think?
Well, I think there are expectations out there that maybe China could help us with Iran, right? Because China relies on Iran for oil. As we know, it's critically important. But I want to go in the Wayback Machine to China in 1997, Asian financial crisis. I think nobody on this panel, possibly with the exception of Mike, was working in the industry at the time. Were you?
Yeah.
Wow, you've aged well.
What about Murphy?
I said Murphy.
He hasn't aged well.
Yeah.
He's 85 years old. He looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You've already slagged him twice. And we
Twice.
started the show.
Thank you for keeping count.
At any rate, what I wanted to say here is that the Asian financial crisis, we came in and saved the world's bacon. I know Jackie remembers that. Time magazine running this famous picture of, Robert Rubin, the Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, his assistants, and Alan Greenspan on the cover, the Committee to Save the World. We organized the rescue of Asia at the time from financial crisis that threatened to swallow the entire globe. Do you think China would do the same thing if it were up to them? I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that they would help us with Iran, which could fix the problem if China climbed on board with us. Look, I think when it comes to China, we are relentlessly naive about the possibilities. You know, China is China first, always.
Do you think President Trump is relentlessly naive on that one? Or do you think, are you saying more like the broader political landscape?
When I talk to academics, academics were saying for decades, we've got to help China. China's in trouble. They're having issues. You know, no, they're not having trouble. They're making their way for sure. And I think we need to be sure what we want out of these negotiations and go for it. I just say, don't be naive. We know where we've been before with China. They are running the world's pharmacy production, especially when it comes to generics. We know how this works. Don't be naive.
Speaking of lots of big names who are going to China, I don't think this is one of them, but you're looking at Oracle.
I am, and you are correct, not one of them. But I'm desperate for your thoughts on this. Wedbush goes from a $225 to a $275 price target on Oracle. Mike Murphy, this is what Wedbush has to say. The market is incorrectly penalizing the stock for their massive CapEx spend. The market is too focused on the near-term cash issues instead of recognizing some of the highly visible contract-based AI demand that is driving the build-out of which Oracle is involved. Agree or disagree?
Agree 100%.
Really?
Yes. Oracle came out with great earnings about 2 quarters ago, and the stock had a huge rally. It put Larry Ellison as the richest man on earth for about a day. And then the private credit crisis kind of hit, and then there was a lot of discussions around whether or not Oracle would be solvent, whether they could pay their debt, and the stock came down into the low 100s. Where it's trading right now, 188, they have demand for their products. They're going to service their debt. So market cap here is still under 600 billion. So there's a lot of room for Oracle to grow here, to continue to move higher, because they have this contracted revenue out there. So I think once you fully get the concerns around their debt off the table, the stock's going to be a lot higher than 188.
Demand is better than debt is bad. I think that's what you're saying here.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go with it.